Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Personal Branding Secrets with me, Ash Borland. And today we are joined by an extra special guest. We are joined by Mike Kim. So normally I have an intro prepared for everyone, but I just want to give a bit of backstory with this. So Mike's podcast, which is called the Brand You podcast. Now, I would like to call, for me, he is the personal branding specialist. It was Mike's podcast that inspired me to start a career in personal branding. It was the one that actually inspired me to start a podcast, and to have him on the show is a great honor. And I cannot wait to dive in for you guys. I think you're going to absolutely love it. But first, let's run the intro. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the show, Mike.
I am honored to be here, Ash. Thanks for having me.
It's a really, like I said off air to Mike, I was like, I'm trying to play it very cool. It's good. It's brilliant to have you on. And it's one of those where, like I say, your podcast is pretty much the number one for personal branding. I don't know how you did it, but it's amazing.
Thank you. I don't know how I did it either. I tried to make it simple. I tried to make it actionable. I tried to make it something that I would listen to. Look, I get sick of listening to myself, so I'm just like, I better hurry up and get this stuff done. I keep shorter episodes, or try to keep it interesting. And that's my rule of thumb. If I don't like it, then I don't think anyone else will like it. So that's how I did it.
There's a lot of people who love it. And there's a lot of people in my circle who are like, well, I said that you're coming on, they're like, oh, yes, nice one, which is really, really good. And I think your podcast is brilliant. So what I like to do, Mike, is I like to dive straight in. Like I said before, the guys who listen to this, they all know there's a very a 5 set questions that they're very much. The reason why we do it is it's very good to hear everybody else will have different stories around those 5 questions, but they're 5 questions that everybody probably asks you all the time. I get asked all the time when I'm like, how did you do what you did? So we'll dive straight in with the first question, and because it sets you up, which is, what is your superhero origin story? So in other words, a background to Mike Kim. How did you get from where you are like now? What was that origin, that journey to get you to that point?
Yeah, so my story all started with a story. It was Thanksgiving 2013 over here in the U.S. That's a big holiday, you know that.
Yeah.
I know, between countries, it's a thing, right? So, but anyways, I remember I was living in New Jersey at the time, and it was the first time that I had hosted my family for the holidays. My mother, my sister, her fiance at the time, now her husband, and everybody, my stepfather, all came over to the house. And that's when I was still working this marketing job at a company just outside New York City, and I was the chief marketing officer. So it was an important position, and my mother and I stayed up till like 1, 2 in the morning. After Thanksgiving, all the other lightweights went to sleep, and we just started drinking, and she just started sharing these stories, Ash, about my childhood, about her life, her teenage years, college years, when she was married. What my dad was like, and all these things. It was one of the best nights of my life. And then I got an email, and my company said, we need you to come into work tomorrow. Now, it wasn't like we were a retail company or anything like that. There was no reason that I really had to go into work. They just wanted me to come in. And that just pissed me off, dude. I'm going to keep it PG, but
you don't have to, don't worry.
Yeah, it pissed me off. And I was working routinely 70 hours a week at this company. And I just thought to myself, like, what if I get in an accident? What if mom gets in an accident? I'm leaving my family at my house and I'm going to work. Like they came all the way here to see me and hang out at my house, and I have to go. And that really started this path down me creating a way out of work. I was trying to escape what I call a present negative to move into a future positive, right? And I was willing to pay the price, but it really started from the core, because I think we have to understand where these desires and where this desire to become a personal brand and create a career as an extension of yourself comes from. Because if you just want to make money, there's a lot of other ways to make money. You can flip houses, you can sell weed, you can do weird things online. There's a lot of weird things you can do online, make money. So it really started for me having a point of view of what my life I wanted my life to look like. And I came up with these 3 questions that I've since helped people kind of dig into their backstory. And the questions are simply, what pisses you off? What breaks your heart? And what's the big problem you're trying to solve? And that day, it pissed me off that I had to go into work. And then eventually I had answers to the other two. But it really started with that first question. And that question is really to dig into the injustice that you feel, right, in the world, the injustice that you see. And I legitimately felt like that was an injustice, that I had to go to work. So, it breaks my heart. That was the compassion I had for people. I saw other folks as I started my side hustle at work. Like, I saw other folks that were smarter than I was, and they were just kind of beat down. They didn't think that they could really do it. And then the third question, what's the big problem you're trying to solve? That's really just your business. Business is just solving a problem for a profit. So when you see those 3 questions and then you answer them, the overlap of those 3 questions, if it was just a simple Venn diagram, the overlap of that would just be your brand message. It would be your founder story. It would be your superhero story. It would be your origin story, whatever you want to call that. And it's just those 3 questions that have helped drive me, and kept me on this path for all these years.
So those questions, to give you a bit of concept to that, so those questions are saved in my notes. As soon as you said that, I was like, they're so true. And I remember, I'm going to say that what will happen with this is, I know because it's you, I'll get sidetracked and we'll end up chatting about deeper things with it, but which is good. Speaking of it, I'd never heard anybody put it in that way before. And I the thing I struggled with personal branding when I started was it felt very intangible. It was very tangible. There was a lot of authenticity, which I believe in, obviously, but it was felt very woo woo. And I think something I loved when I listened to one of your podcasts, that was the first time I stumbled on it, was one of those questions. And that question of like, what pisses you off? It was more about finding what you don't like.
Yes.
And
yes.
Clarity was like, it's very good, very powerful.
Yeah, I think to that point, I grew up just outside of New York City, so we have our fair share of snow, bad weather, and your car gets stuck in the snow. You park the car. In New Jersey, New York, they just shovel all the snow and bury your car, right? Just to clear the road. It doesn't make any sense, right? But it's what they have to do. And when you're trying to get out of that parking spot, you don't just slam the gas pedal, turn the wheel, and just try to push out, because the snow's underneath. You have to go back and forth, back and forth. You see these cars, they do that. They go up front, forward a little bit, and they try to get some traction. Then they put the car in reverse and they back out a little bit and they put it forward. And the whole time they're trying to get the tire to catch some traction on the road somewhere, right? And so much of the time we think life is just supposed to go one way. And that's not really how it works. Life is a big zigzag. And so when you said, you got to find out what you don't like, that's absolutely true. You can't just go one way. You have to go this way, back out, that way, back out. And it's the life of contrast. And that's what happens in our lives. It's what happens even in business once you get established and up and running. It's always like this interplay between I always say clarity is like a marriage of movement and meditation. Move forward, stop, assess where you are, move in a different direction maybe. And it just feels like a big zigzag, but that's how real life works, So yeah, I totally resonate with what you say.
So how did you, to learn a bit more about it for my listeners and stuff, how did you started this side hustle, which obviously is now we're going to talk about mistakes later on, but I saw your post about your mistakes, which I loved. So we'll dive into that one, which you said about the things that your business grew too big and you did all of it, which I think is a really powerful post. I've sent it to a few people. How did you make that transition, and what made you decide? You're obviously in a high level marketing job. What made you decide to go, I'm going to go all in on me as a personal brand? What made you decide that it was a personal brand you wanted to build and not just another business with a name and stuff like that? What was that?
Yeah, I think it's just that I wanted to keep things simple. I have friends who have started businesses. I have a friend, Christopher, who opened a pizza shop a couple of years ago, and he was telling me what it took to open this pizza shop. And I was just like, I would pull my hair out. if I had to do that. It's just, nobody wakes up one day and says, I'm going to start a pizza shop
Yeah.
and expects to have it up and running in a month. You got to build a business plan. You got to get a loan. You got to find a location. You've got to rent equipment. You haven't even touched the marketing and branding. You don't even know if the pizza's good yet. And so what I did was I looked at business through the lens of my friend, through the lens of a quote unquote real business owner.
Yeah.
And what it would take to grow a company, like a real company. And you'd have to do all of those things. You have to get startup capital. I don't have millions of dollars sitting in the bank or something like that. And you'd have to get all that stuff squared away. And when I saw what was possible with a blog or a podcast, I loved coaching and speaking. I had a background in that. So I chose that path because it was just simpler. The barrier of entry was much lower. Now, you still have to pay the same price. I still thought through my business the same way, with the same kind of intensity that you would if you were opening a pizzeria or a bar or something like that. Because I do think the market self-corrects. I think that entrepreneurs who don't think through and pay the real price of starting a business, they end up in that space. And that's kind of what led me to that post that you were talking about, which we can talk about in a second. But for me, it was, oh, wow, I can share my ideas on social media. I can write. So let me start a blog. And that's really how it started. 2013, I started my blog and nobody read it. But I just said to myself, this will be the year of the blog. Hell or high water, a post is coming out on Monday morning. And then 2014, I added a podcast, but I didn't stop blogging. 2015, because I built an audience for 2 years, I started a mastermind. That's the year I went full-time in my business, because I was able to fill that and take back so much of my time. 2016 was the year of the product launch. 2017 was the year of the live event, which I filled through people who bought my product.
Yeah.
Right. And then 2018 was the year of just travel and speaking. I did a lot of speaking engagements that year.
Yeah.
2019 was the year of video, and 2020, this year, was the year of coronavirus. No, I'm just kidding. Right. But it was the year that I wrote. It's the year I wrote my book. So we're working on that now. We're wrapping it up in just a few weeks. But you can see here, people look at my brand and they'll say, look at all these things that he does. I'm like, no, that's not how it started. I didn't wake up one day and just do all of them.
Yeah.
It was kind of, I'm Korean, but, I'll take a page out of the Chinese zodiac. You open those fortune cookies. It's like the year of the pig, the year of the horse, whatever it is. And I just approached it that way because that's how I saw my friends build their businesses, like real quote unquote companies. They're like, we're going to do this one thing this year. We're going to add that to the product line. You don't see Apple, drop 5 new products. They upgrade the iPhone. They upgrade the iPad. It's not usually even in the same launch that they do that.
Yeah.
They just stick with one and then they add something little by little, year over year. And that, I think, is the key to building a real sustainable business, even if you get to do it from your laptop and at your house and through a microphone like we're both doing today.
And that's very powerful. And that's funny enough. I was saying off air about Philip Van Dusen, who was on 2 episodes ago. So he's got a big YouTube channel, mastermind groups, very much. He was head of, what did he do? I know this because I know him from, again, through a mutual friend. It's through Bob, funnily enough. I met him, and he was head of branding, is a VP at branding for PepsiCo. So that's how, as I met him. And he did the same thing, which is interesting with you about the blog. He said the same thing about YouTube. So 5 years ago, he set his YouTube channel up and he said, I just got to, on Monday morning, if I don't do it, then I would be fired, because that's if I was employed, that was it. And it didn't do anything else. And it seems to be the people who are successful that I've seen, which I have high amount of energy and high amount. So I can watch something like Gary Vee and think I can do that. The problem with it is you end up being a mess everywhere.
Yeah.
But I listened to something you said, which was quite interesting, which you used to talk about big rocks. And I don't know if you'd remember, but I listened to a podcast you talked about saying that you should have your big rocks that you launch, and you should then only have the small pebbles and the sand that go into the jar. And that's a really powerful advice, because too many people want it instantly. That's something I have seen a lot. So what normally I would ask the high points, and actually I do want to ask you that. Let's do that first, because I want to get sidetracked otherwise. But I always ask people who are on this personal brand journey, what have been some of the high points that you've had to kind of pinch yourself? You can't believe that you know that moment where you say you're chatting, you having your mum, you've done this, the side hustle, it builds. What have been some of those moments that you can think back of over the last 5.5 years and gone, I really can't believe that
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, no, honestly, the high points are anytime I get to leverage my business to help open a door for somebody that they couldn't open themselves. One of the things that I'm most proud of, and this was, in that third year or fourth year of my business that I started, I said it was the year of my live events. My first live event I held in I believe it was 2000. Let me do the math right. I believe it was 2017, right? Yeah, late 2017. And I was living in New Jersey at the time, and it was an invite only event. It was small, it was 40 people, it was a high ticket event, but everybody who came to the event I knew personally. And this is how I marketed it, Ash. I was like, hey, I'm holding an event. There's 2 or 3 people you need to meet who are going to be there. Just be there. And that's how I filled the event. So they came, and it was called Influence and Impact. And my opening session, it was in this nice hotel in New Jersey and everything. And we had all this catered food and blah, blah, blah. And I said, because I knew all these people, I didn't have to, there were no strangers there. I said, hey, listen, so here's why we're doing this event. Because you guys need to meet you, and you need to meet you. And the only way that this would ever happen is if I died. And they were like, what? I was like, yeah, the only way this would ever happen would be at my funeral. And I'd like to be around when you all meet each other so that I could actually connect to you. And they all had kind of a good chuckle, but it was true.
Yeah.
I didn't want to run a business event with a bunch of strangers to upsell them into, a ton of courses or masterminds. And I have no problem with that. That's just not what I wanted to do at that point in my business. And these people just connected with each other over those 2 days. And we had just the best time. And I did the event again a couple of months later. I haven't done it in a couple of years, but that really brought me a ton of joy because I felt like my work was done. I did the best with all the influence I had and used it to connect people to one another. Now I could die in peace. It's like, and so that was a huge, huge thing for me. Now I've tried to recreate that on a smaller level for people who are in my mastermind groups. I really do care about them and do whatever I can. I do more than, I say that I will.
Yeah.
And I think any one of them would say that. If they have products or things to launch. My longtime assistant, Chelsea Brinkley, has created a ton of workflows for me, processes. I'm like, Chelsea, let's sell these. I'll give you half.
Yeah.
And we've been able to do that. And it's been selling really, really well. And so this girl's got a product now. Her and her husband just bought a house. It's awesome. And it's like, hey, I helped her get started in this. And I know most other people wouldn't do that. So that just brings me a lot of joy. So it's really about the other people that I've been able to help or open doors for or connect to. And those are my high points, to be honest. Yeah, it's not the money. It's not all the speaking engagements. It's those moments.
I think listening to you now and listen to that, this is like I say, this is more like a fanboy episode for me because everyone else will be thinking, "Oh God, shut up, Ash." But it is the reason why I really enjoyed your podcast, and it's listening to that now, and it's with the way you're saying it, and because of your high points. I had so many different people on here. Like I said, your guests, like we're like 50 people in. We've got loads booked up, and it's this thing of like you sounded sincere, and that's what's really coming across there. And I'm listening to you talking about the high points. You've not gone like, I know you spoke at Social Media World. That's a huge thing. Like all of the, you've not. I've even wrote it down thinking, I always write down the guest what I think their high point is, and you haven't said these things that are huge wins. And it just reminded me. I'm thinking that's the reason why I think I stayed on your podcast was you just sound genuinely wanting to help, and it was very easy. And I think that's a really endearing thing. I really like that. That's really
Oh,
cool.
thanks, man. Yeah, no,
Um,
that's really true. Those big opportunities, they come and go.
yeah,
I've always thought about, and I know it sounds a little morbid because I've been talking about this, but who's going to miss you when you're actually gone from this earth? It's
yeah,
not going to be the people who saw one of 800 people who were in a conference that saw me speak somewhere. It's the people that I see every single week or every other week in a mastermind group. It's the people I work with every single day, like Chelsea. It's the people who have new best friends because I brought them together at an event, and I did the work to make that happen. Just to get together, get people
yeah,
together. Like honestly, Ash, like that's this idea of legacy is completely overrated unless it's done through people who you really know. I mean, uh, Steve Jobs. We talked about Apple for a second.
yeah.
I remember when he first died, every business person in the world seemed to be quoting him in their keynotes. Have you noticed? Nobody does it anymore.
Nobody, no. Yeah, you're right.
Even that guy is forgotten. He's
That's weird.
forgotten. He's built these devices that the entire world runs on. He's forgotten.
Yeah,
So this idea that the masses are who you should live for, it doesn't work. The people who miss him and still think about him are his kids and his wife and his best friends. Those are the people who miss. Like that's who I've chosen to live my life for and to build this business to empower me to help. So yeah, those are just my thoughts, to
I
be
think
honest
that's very.
about
Yeah,
that.
it's so
Yeah.
true. And I think Steve Jobs is probably the biggest personal brand. He was massive.
Yeah.
The man. I mean, I got his multiple. I can never get it right because I'm dyslexic. So writing is not my. That with me and you would not be my strong pursuit. Um, but his biography or autobiography, and I read that, and it was amazing. But he was not a nice man. Let's just put it that way.
No, no, absolutely not.
And
Absolutely not.
they just then and that level of notoriety made it inexcusable. It was crazy. I couldn't believe the stuff he
Hmm.
did.
Hmm.
But still, so the next thing I always ask, so the highs, what have been some of the struggles? And the reason why I ask this question, I always give a bit of context. Um, I've been building my personal brand. I made a pivot to this line of work before, but I was in finance before that. I've had a weird career. People know it's very strange, but it's one of those where I like this question. It means a lot to me. This question is, what are some of the struggles that you have faced? And the reason why I say this is there was a moment last year where everything from the outside for me looked very, very good. And then that's why I talk about your post, a bit interesting, but it looked very, very good. Everyone was going, God, actually killing it. This is happening. This is happening. All of that stuff you just said, the very much the things that people care about. But internally, everything was falling apart. Like loads of things. Like, and my wife used to laugh and say, like, people just do not have a clue. And this real reality for me hitting of this Instagram versus reality moment. I'd never seen it before. I'd never had it. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like I have a responsibility to share with people truthfully what is going on, because we look up and idolize these people we don't know. And I opened up, and that's when this whole thing changed, and my business grew, and everything happened because I was like, actually, guys, you think that I'm doing really well, and I'm not, or actually, this is very hard. And so, one of the questions I love to ask with anybody on here, especially to anyone who's built a brand, who is known publicly for something, what have been, and I've seen the post, so we'll dive into that one. But what have been some of the struggles that you have faced during these 5 years that you've been doing it, that you're happy to share?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing would be I went through a divorce. And that was, and people knew, but they didn't know. They could tell something was up because I didn't, air dirty laundry on social media or anything like that. But people could tell. They're like, how come,
Mm,
Iris isn't in his pictures with him anymore? Or, why did she delete him on social media?
yeah,
Uh, and all that to say, that's not to cast blame on whoever. We're friends. We've come back to a place where it's just like, okay, hey, we need to talk about some of the stuff you did or where I did or whatever. We both contributed to the situation, um, but that all happened as my business was growing, and that's also very, very odd. And I look back on that and I wonder sometimes, like, would I trade all of what I've built to have that life that we used to have together? And I stopped asking that question because it's just pointless. Just the past is the past is the past. But when I was going through that situation, it was very, very difficult. And we had been married for about 10 years at that time, no kids, so it wasn't, as quote bad. I don't know. I don't know. But I hear it's worse if you have kids. But yeah, I spent months at a time, like a month at a time, sometimes away from home because she's just like, I just need space to figure my life out and blah, blah, blah. And that was just incredibly painful. Now, what they I love what you said about Instagram or whatever they people show on social media. If you look at my social media at the time, it would have looked like I was traveling to Phoenix and Los Angeles, and what people don't realize is that I was doing that because, this person needed some space. And they tell you when you work for yourself, you can kind of just do whatever you want and go wherever you want. What they don't tell you is that when you're going through a really hard time, you can do whatever you want and go wherever you want.
Yeah.
And there's no one to talk to. There's no one to, like, you can't distract yourself because you're your own boss. So there were days that I woke up at 2 in the afternoon in time for a 3 o'clock mastermind call and then went straight back to bed because I just didn't have the emotional or creative bandwidth. This book that I was writing, I signed the book deal for 5 years ago, and I didn't write the book for them because of what we were going through, and I just didn't have the creative energy to make it happen. And so when we talk about like the lows or the struggles, like life never picks a convenient time to throw you a test. Like that it never does that. It's just like, here it is.
Yeah.
And we had to navigate through that. It was very, very difficult. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And it was also the thing that helped me grow the most in my entire life. And thankfully, we've been able to kind of just put that behind us and just be cordial and friends. Like, check on each other once in a blue moon. Still draw the boundaries, but there's closure there.
Yeah.
And all these events that I was talking about, like those conferences that I held, I did all that while this was going on. And to have friends around me at those events who knew, because they all knew me personally, to have people when I would travel who understood what I was going through, where I could just lean on them when we're at at a conference somewhere. My gigs at Social Media Marketing World started when that was all going on. The projects that I worked with on really big clients, Donald Miller, John Maxwell, this was all during those years. So, you see, on one hand, the explosive business growth. And on the other hand, what I'm going through, it's just like, well, I'm not going to tell people about this publicly because I care about this person.
Yeah.
I'm not going to air dirty laundry on social media like other idiots do. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate.
No, not if you want to build a brand, not at all.
And even well, you should be authentic. Yeah, but there's a difference between authenticity and transparency.
Yeah.
Authenticity is like, let me be honest about how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like crap. Transparency is, let me tell you everything my wife did or everything I did. That's TM. It's just too much information. So that kind of access should be restricted just to a very, very small circle in your life. And that's up to you to decide. And I think sometimes we get this idea of authenticity and transparency mixed up because we want to be real on social media and want to be real about the struggles. But I'm telling you guys, you don't need to air out everything, especially if it's going to hurt another person.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but those were big struggles. And then, as a result of that, there were also struggles in the business. I was overworking because, I was trying to work to distract myself from all the stuff that was going on. And that led into a lot of, poor planning in the business and lack of efficiencies to get things done. And, that's what Chelsea, my assistant, helped me with. So yeah, there's a lot there, man. There's a lot.
That
It's not
is.
an
I was
easy path.
thinking, wow. I mean, I think you're right. The thing that you said then as well, which is thank you first of all for being really open. That's very that you don't know to do that, and that's nice that you have, because I think that's one of the reasons why I asked that question. Is I said before, like, it was, you know, for me, I had a mental breakdown whilst everything else was going very well. But because I was an actor before in a creative career, they don't teach you. That's an amazing skill. I used to joke and say, I'm brilliant at being everything you want me to be. Just underneath, everything is not happening as it should be.
Sure. Yeah.
But the thing you said about authenticity versus transparency, I love that, because I talk about that a lot with my coaching clients, and I talk about that whenever I'm doing speaking gigs. Is that a similar thing I talk about is individuality versus originality. So I say there's a big difference between embracing who you are and what you want to be, instead of focusing on some white whale that you're trying to be the person who invented something. I see people do that all the time. You know, it's like with you, with your podcast. Like I listened to your podcast years when it started, and I could spend my whole life pretending, like, trying to find my version of yours. But truthfully, I could just listen to you and go, okay, so how can I make something like yours, but put my individual flair? I think that's a similar thing with that authenticity to transparency. You know, people don't need to know your entire life story. They don't need to know the names of your kids and things if you don't want to share that, and you can still be authentic without that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, one thing I've been excited for this one for you for this question. I asked this question, which is, what does personal branding mean, or personal brand? How would you define it? Now, the reason I asked this question, I always give backstory to these questions, because there's real reasons behind them. Because the real intent is, when I started my own journey in this, I started doing lots of research into what personal branding was. And what I noticed was it seems to mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And depending on their line of work is depending on whether they've decided to add it as a bolt-on. If you're a photographer, usually every photographer I've met is a personal brand coach, and digital marketers, and they all look at it in entirely different ways. YouTube was a nightmare trying to find anything about it. So I know with myself, I looked at it. My mentor is a behavioral economist and and a behavioral psychologist as well. And I looked at it more from a behavioral science point of view of how do we feel, why do we act, and the emotions behind it. Your podcast was one of those resources. Philip, funnily enough, which is why the two of you is amazing to have on. But I'd be interested to hear, and I ask everyone on every guest, what do they define it as? Because the people who are on here have all built successful personal brand businesses. They seem to all have a similar concept.
Yeah. So I get this question from time to time, and I haven't figured out like a real punchy way to say this.
I don't need to.
But I really honestly just think a personal brand is the image and reputation you've decided to construct, real or not, to show to the world for a purpose. All this stuff about just be yourself online, that's not true. People don't do that. There's always an ulterior motive. Even for me, there's an ulterior motive, you know, whether I realize it or not, whether I'm doing it subconsciously or not. So as much as I try to be authentic, look, I'm not going to post a picture of myself where I've just woken up out of bed. You know, like that doesn't serve anybody. That is me. It doesn't serve anybody. I mean, like, you know, I don't want to, I look at my social media, I don't want to see that, you know, you know, and it's just, and it doesn't mean that you're doing it in a manipulative way. It just means that you're constructing an image of yourself that you feel is presentable to the world. That's what a personal brand is. That can be troublesome because, like you said, if that's not really who you are, now you got to just lie everywhere. And that gets exhausting. So I try to be honest. You know, I try to be authentic. I'm here. I'm there. This is what I did today. That's what I did today. I'm not thinking like this is going to be really good for Instagram engagement to post this kind of thing. Because, you know, I sometimes get really good engagement. I sometimes don't. That's not a metric for me. I just want people to get a glimpse of my life. That's how I've chosen to build my personal brand. An indistinguishable blend between my professional and personal life. That's all I've done. Right. So people know who my nephews are. People know who my parents are. People know who my friends are. And that's okay with me. Others, if you're in the profession of law, you can't. Yeah, I get it. You can't do. Look, if I hire a lawyer, I don't want my lawyer's Instagram be full of pictures with food and
Yeah.
who he's meeting with or she's meeting with and where they're vacationing. That just makes me feel weird. I'm just like, whoa, I'm funding that vacation, with
Yeah.
this crazy retainer that I'm paying my lawyer, right? So there are some lines to be drawn there depending on the profession, and you decide what's appropriate for you. But to me, I just think that it's a construct of who you are that you've chosen to show to the world. Now, if you're not living authentically, that can be really tough because now you've created like a superhero, like you started our talk off with. You created a Batman versus Bruce Wayne scenario, and that can be very, very exhausting for a lot of people. So it just depends, but let's not pretend a personal brand, quote unquote, is real.
Yeah.
It's not. It's something that we've constructed for a purpose,
Yeah.
your business or to help others or whatever it is, to get you something, to gain you something. Um, why else would these weird people rent out expensive Airbnbs and do video shoots and pretend like it's their house?
Yeah. Oh,
Like
you're so
that to
right.
me is just like, that's ridiculous. Okay, but okay. That's what he wants to sell. That's what he wants to sell. That's what she wants to sell. That's what she wants to sell. Fine. So it's just a construct that you created that you choose to present to the world.
I love
And
that.
yeah, that's it.
I think do you know what? You're spot on, actually. And actually, Mike, it's exactly alignment with what I believe. Um, I find, like, I think when you came on LinkedIn, I think I left a comment or a message to you saying, like, oh, welcome to LinkedIn, because you'd finally come on it. Um, and it was, I get in lots of debates on LinkedIn
Mm,
about the concept, because what I found, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. It's where I kind of built my following of some sorts. And there's always an ongoing thing. That's why I asked this question, because it becomes something that I'm constantly trying to justify, because I haven't looked at it as a over romanticized. It's authentic and be who you are and show the world you. And the way I've always seen it is exactly what you've said. Is because of my background in performing arts, I'm a product. So what product
hmm
do you need me to be, and as you said, then how can I be authentically me through that product?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
Reputation management, really,
hmm
and controlling the narrative. And I think that's something that people always want to throw words in and over romanticize it and make
hmm
it either more complex than it needs to be, or more um less complex than it actually is. As you said,
hmm
like, what goes behind it. I love the fact that you said there, which is very true. You have a motive. Everyone has a motive. And if you don't have a
hmm
motive, genuinely, like, I don't make videos for the joy of it every day. Otherwise, I just watch TV. So I like that. It's a very good answer. It's really good. Um, Last but not least, Mike, the questions that I like to ask for three tangible bits of advice that you would give to someone who is looking to start their personal brand now. Um, the reason why I say tangible, again, I'm a big advocate of making the intangible tangible. A lot of people, again, with the woo woo stuff, brilliant. They serve a purpose. I'm a very spiritual guy, but there's a time and place when you need to have processes and measures. So, what if someone said to you, Mike, how do I start my personal brand? Have no idea what to do. What would be the three things you would say?
Yeah. If they're starting completely from zero, they don't know what they want to do. This is what I did. I found this really helpful. And I just sort of stumbled onto this exercise. I started to write down everything I did at work. So when I was working that CMO job, I'd be like, I led meetings, whatever. But this is even before I went into marketing. So before I went into marketing, I was the music director at a church, and I taught high school kids SAT exams. Like, I taught them English. So when people ask me, how come you never get nervous when you speak? I'm like, have you ever tried to teach high school kids? Like, yeah, if you can do that well, you can do anything, right? So I wrote these things down. I taught SATs. Right? SATs are college entrance exams here in the United States. And then I wrote down, I spoke at church. And then I wrote down, I performed music at church. I produced albums. I marketed albums. I hosted conferences. I led team meetings of volunteers at for the music team. And then I just took my pen, and I don't know what happened. I just saw it, and I crossed out the last few words of every line. So it just read, I taught, I speak, I marketed, I led, meetings.
Yeah.
I hosted conferences. And it was like I saw myself in a new light. Because what we tend to do, especially if you are working a day job right now and you're looking or dipping your toe in the water to see if this is something that you want to build and do, you have to separate yourself from the role. Because the role didn't teach me to speak and to write and to market. Like I did those things. So I could take those skills and go somewhere else with them. And that was like the first like aha moment for me. So that's the first thing I would say to anyone who's like, I don't know where to start from. I'm starting from zero. Write down everything you do at work, not just what's on the job description, but everything you do. Like I have to host guests who come into the company. A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a visitor coming in today. I want you to show them around, blah, 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 talk up the company. That's a really big skill.
Yeah.
Right? And most people don't realize that. So you just take inventory first. That's the first thing that I would do. The second thing I would do is really um, answer those questions that I shared before. What pisses you off? What breaks your heart? What's the big problem you're trying to solve? Because again, if you don't live from your core and aren't living from, or aren't giving your fullest gifts because you're not living from the core, people are going to be able to tell. And so I just start with those very open-ended questions. And people are like, well, pissed off about what? I'm like, anything. I just want you to write it on the board. Because most people have not exercised that muscle of self-expression because they don't let you do that in corporate.
No.
You're not allowed to speak your mind. And if you're going to be in this space, you have to learn to speak your mind and have a point of view. A point of view is what cuts through the noise. And then the third thing, actually, I know you're probably familiar with this because you followed some of the stuff I've taught, is I just have what I call a brand new blueprint. And it's these 8 steps that help you build a personal brand. So you have your personal stories and they all build one step on top of each other. Number 2 is the point of view, that we've talked about, what pisses you off, what breaks your heart. Third is platform. You have to have a platform to speak that point of view from, whether it's a podcast, a blog, whatever it is, social media. Number 4, you have your positioning, where you sit relative to the competition. Once you understand that, it's easy to build, number 5, a product. Number 6, to price the product.
Yeah.
Number 7, to pitch the product. That's your sales message. And number 8, to find partners. Most folks build that stuff out of order, and they're like digits in a phone number, so you don't really end up dialed in. That's that when I look at even the biggest brands who I've worked with, thought leadership brands, you name it, and they say, Mike, we've established our brand, but we don't know what to do with this next product or this next book or this launch. I take them right through that framework. I'm like, what's the personal story behind this product? Why did you create it? What's your point of view? Why should this be different than anything else? What's the platform we're going to market this on? What's the positioning? Is it a high tier product or low tier? What is the product? How would we price it? How we pitch it? How do we find partners? It's just boom. It's just every
Solve
time.
it.
Yeah. So a lot of people will start like, I want to build a product. And I'm like, hold on, time out. That's step number 4. If you don't think through the other 3, this whole thing's not going to work. So those are the 3 things, man. I mean, if you're really starting from zero, just first take inventory of the skills that you have, and it will help change the story you're telling yourself about who you are.
I love that. I've never done that, and yet I was kind of doing it as you're talking, thinking, God, you're so right. Because if I did that, I would be here. Because it's kind of what I did
Yeah.
then. But you're right, I would be where I was, and then you live, and then you feel like you're doing the right thing. But that's so true. Like I was just thinking in my head, thinking I did this, and if I remove that, I always say to people always go, God, Ash, you've done when they meet me, they're like, you've done a really weird range of jobs, and I'm like, but I haven't. If I actually connected them all through, I can see the line that goes through them all very easily, but
Mhm.
you can't when you're looking in. And that's what we see in the inventory. That is that. I think actually that's the skill, is that thing, talking, teaching. It's really interesting. There's some really good tips. I love that.
Cool.
So Mike, thank you so much for coming on. What I'd like to do, the last little bit of the podcast is, I always call it the shameless plug because it makes people feel uncomfortable, but it's fine. And that is, if people wanted to work with you, to be part of your mastermind groups, anything at all, how can they reach you? What do you offer? I mean, I've mentioned the podcast, which I will tag in the show notes anyway. But the floor is yours, mate. To pitch your services if you want.
Yeah. So we've been very, very fortunate. Our groups are full already. We just pitched one 2 days ago with one email and it filled up. So, and I try very hard not to overextend myself. So we have a couple of other programs that we offer, but the place to start would be what I call the Brand You Bootcamp. And it's just at mikekim.com/start. And this is specifically for anyone who is trying to start a side hustle. And those 3 questions that I've just shared with you, I do a little bit more in-depth teaching there. You get 3 free videos. They're actually taken from a paid course. So you're really getting the actual part of the paid course. And there's a workbook that walks you through all that stuff. A little Facebook community there where people can talk through things. And that's honestly where I would start. When the book comes out, that'll be another way to start. It's just not out yet. It's not going to be out for a little while. So you're stuck with watching videos and doing a workbook. But the videos are no longer than 12 or 13 minutes each. And the exercise will really help you brain dump kind of, all the things that I've been sharing about today and give you an understanding of what this space in this industry looks like. So honestly, that's where I'd start. mikekim.com/start.
Perfect. And with socials, where's the best social out to reach you? Which is the best one?
Instagram by far. I don't even check the other ones, to be honest. It's like LinkedIn and Facebook. It's just like they're like necessary evils to me. Instagram, I just love using, but fun fact, I don't even have it on my phone anymore. I've deleted. Yeah, it's just too much. I waste too much time. So I go on Instagram, I look at it on my laptop, check all my messages. And then if I need to upload stories, I just reinstall it on my phone. I know it sounds crazy.
No, it's fine.
I post the stories and then I delete the app.
that now takes a whole new meaning to when I watch your stories.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. So it's just like I stack them. Yeah, I stack them at the end of the day. I just record videos throughout the day. I spend 10 minutes, stacking them and posting them. And then I delete the app again. And in the morning, I can check on my laptop, see if any messages have come in. I can respond there. That's how I do it.
I'll message you there next time now, because I do LinkedIn and I was like, bless him. I don't know I think he's just not even going to turn up. On that, then, just quickly before you go, because that's interesting that you say that. It's not actually anything to do with what we're saying, but because you've just said about the Instagram, what was your take on The Social Dilemma? Did you watch it yet?
I've watched about half of it, and then it just made me like, oh wow, yeah, this is all true. This is all stuff that we probably all knew. But yeah, honestly, the whole change in social media for me was because I was writing this book, and it was just it's not like I dislike social media. I love social media, but the combination of social media apps and my phone is what was killing me. So, I know in that documentary, they talk about your phone feeling like a slot machine. I love that illustration. That one guy said it was like a slot machine. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a perfect way to describe it. So I'm going to destroy the slot machine. I love my phone. I love social media. It's just the medium by which I'm using it is really, really taking away from my productivity. So that's why I did that. So yeah, I still use social media pretty regularly. I check it every day.
Yeah.
But I've just deleted the apps from my phone. So
it just made me think that after when you said that, I thought, my sister's a psychology teacher for secondary. Well, for you all at high school, there'd be high school. We had big debates about it. Because obviously, a very interesting one. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on. I'm going to run the intro now, but it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. I've been really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Bye.